All right, all right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Authority Figures. My name's Matthew Emmorey. On this show, I spend time with authors. I've read their books, and we get to digest the book and really dive into some of the concepts, some of their motivations, what nurtured their creativity to begin with. And today, I have one of my best friends and a creative partner in my life. And actually, the individual who brought me into self-publishing school in the first place, he hired me. His name is Dillon Barr. Welcome, Dillon.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, talk about full circle, bringing you into selfpublishing.com, becoming friends through that, and then being able to create with you, dude. I'm excited to be on this.
Yeah. Our creative lives have been very intertwined in the last few years. I didn't even write a single book until I came into self-publishing school. So you've known me through my entire publishing life, and I've known you through your.
I was going to say same, dude. You have known me from the beginning, since I started nonfiction, and you started nonfiction.
Well, yeah, crazy. So we've gotten to know each other quite well over the last few years. So many creative principles and frameworks and different things that you've taught in business and you've taught in creativity. And you operate within life. I've just seen these things have such a big impact in your life and in my life. So I really like, through the process of this conversation, it's like people to really understand who you are and what sort of well of creativity you're drawing from in the projects that you're working on. So
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So where in your life, where do you feel like your creativity comes from? Who has nurtured that? Maybe where did you first experience that as a kid?
Before we start, one, thank you. I think I've already thanked you. Two, I want you to do me a favor, and I give you the permission to make fun of me throughout this interview. I just got done listening to a radio interview that I did that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. And as I was listening to it, anytime the person asked a question, I always started with, wow, that's a great question. And it was so repetitive. So if I start saying that, please interrupt me, make fun of me. But the reason I love that question, it's not great, but the reason I love it is it was actually, I talk about this in my first nonfiction book. My first nonfiction book, The Happiness Gap, talks about really creating your own core values or your own family values based on the people that raised you, right? So whether it's your mom or dad or your father figure, mother figure, for me, I was raised by my grandparents. And that's really where I think I first got the creativity in my life nurtured. My grandma is who I give credit to when it comes to my creativity. I grew up with her as I was going through elementary school. And, as a young boy, I was always hyper. I mean, I think nowadays they like ADHD. I was running around everywhere. And I think a lot of times people are just like, hey, you're scaring me. Here's a tablet, or here's this, like, let's calm down. And my grandma would just kind of feed into it. I'd be out in the backyard. They gave me a broomstick and I was pretending to be bad guys with my bow staff. And instead of coming in and my grandparents being like, oh, okay, let's eat now, my grandma would be like, who are you fighting out there? Like, who are you beating up? Why are you beating them up? And she would like really want to dive into what the story I was telling myself, which I thought was awesome. Like I always loved to answer that. And then that led into like me liking to tell stories. So I remember when I was in third grade, we had to do a picture book. We had to make our own picture book, whether it was fiction or nonfiction. And I chose nonfiction because I was really into animals at the time. And it was the story of me saving this otter that had gotten trapped in an oil spill. And I did all the pictures for it. And I ended up winning best nonfiction book in the project. And then I did another book when I was in fifth grade that, you remember Michigan Chillers or American Chillers? Is like a version of Goosebumps. Stories? Yeah, they're kind of like these horror stories of different cities in Michigan. They said, hey, make your own Michigan Chiller, but for any city in the United States. And my hockey team at the time was the Bruins. So I chose the barbaric Bruins of Boston. And we had to capture these huge Bruins that have attacked the city. And the only way we could capture them is if we shot hockey pucks at them. But it's just a weird concept, man. And I remember doing it. My grandma just always wanted to be a part of the process. She wanted to be like, well, what happens next? What happens next? And so I think not only she instilled it in me, I may have instilled it in myself with my hyperactiveness, but she definitely nurtured it for me
Yeah.
at a young age.
Yeah, yeah. And I talk to people all day long about their creative endeavors, and it's interesting how often we encounter shame that has prevented somebody from really being as creative as they want to be. You know, and it often will go back to, I was just talking to Bella the other day about this girlfriend, which you know,
Hey,
she
Bella.
was saying when she was singing and learning guitar as a kid, everybody would run from the room, covering their ears, screaming. And then
Jesus.
yeah. And then like a few months after this has just become a routine. Her mom was like, "Oh, you actually have a good voice." But their knee-jerk reaction was to shame her creativity, not to nurture it. And that's where a lot of people grow up, in this environment where creativity is sort of like, it's not childlike, it's like childish, and we need to stop it because it's not practical, it's not logical, it's not going to take you anywhere in your life. So I want to segue that into now. You know, you're working on comics, and we'll talk a lot more about this comic that you're working on now. But as I hear you talk about your grandmother, I think this seems very much in alignment with the spirit of Unfound Anamnesis, and kind of what sort of people we'd like to be for kids in their lives, nurturing their creativity. So open-ended question here, but can you talk a little bit about the mission behind the comics that are now being created, Unfound Anamnesis?
Yeah. I just caught myself. You sent me a structure beforehand, because I always like going into a podcast being like, I work in frameworks, right? So I'm like, what's the flow of it? And I remember seeing that, and it really hit me of like, what is the heart of it? And I honestly think at the heart of it, it's this passion to create and to be, I like you say, childlike and not childish, but to explore our own child and put that out there courageously. And to kind of be, I love using the word, a pillar of possibility for those in our life, because it's something we're creating together, those in my life, to be that person that like, oh, he's willing to be vulnerable and childlike. And I think when you can do that as a mentor to the next generation, what I'd really love to do is instill creativity in young kids. I started talking with this, I think she's in third grade. I just had a baby shower. My wife and I just had a baby shower a week ago. We're expecting our first in July. And all these people came. And at the end, there's this dad. We were at this boat club, and this dad came with this little girl, and she was asking me questions because my stepmom was like, hey, her name was Randy. She's like, hey, Randy, you know, Dillon wrote a comic. And she goes, oh my gosh, that's so cool. What's it about? And I'm telling her the premise of the book. And she's like, that's really cool. And I'm like, you could take a quiz to kind of see where you would live. And she's like, that's awesome. I want to work on my own book. And I think a lot of times a parent, like someone would just be like, oh, that's cool. But to be able to say, oh, what's it about? Where does it take place? What's the premise? And to be able to talk to a child like I would talk to you about a book, and to hear the ideas she had and to fuel it. I think a lot of people don't know how to have that next conversation with them, to ask questions. And I feel both of us are well adapted and ready to do it. So to be able to talk to her and say, hey, tell me about the main characters, like what are they going through? So that just lights me up, man. And seeing pictures right now of young kids like drawing what their characters or what their beasts would look like in our world is, for me to be creative and lead the charge with you, and then to see young kids who have this passion feel okay to step forward and add to it, and ideally then their parents as well. So then you have that connection between parent and kid through creativity. Like that lights me up. I think we're going to talk about boundlessness, my deep desire, later in this call, but it's like that is at the heart what I would love to build with Unfound Anamnesis.
Yeah, and I love it. And yeah, you are being a pillar of possibility. This idea of like delighting your own inner child and being childlike and being silly and letting people know like, hey, this is a great way to go through life. Just creative and fun, not so dang serious. When I think of this, the mission behind Unfound Anamnesis, the comics, and really everything that I'm doing creatively, is I come from a family of teachers. My mom's a teacher. My mom's sister's a teacher. My mom's a teacher. I thought for a long time that I was going to be a teacher, and it's still very much like ingrained, like working with kids. And so I look at the entire public school system in our country, and on an individual level, if I look at most teachers, like my mom and my aunt, my grandma, these women, these teachers are doing their best to look at the individuals and to treat them accordingly, to treat them like individuals and to nurture them like individuals. But the collective education system does homogenize the student body into one thing. Like, this is a single entity to be educated, and here's everything that we can educate them with. And it makes sense. It's like hard to customize it by individuals on like a government level. So I don't really blame them for that. And I'm thankful that there are teachers out there that are really trying to like nurture creativity in kids. But still, I just feel like not every kid grows up having somebody in their life with this nurturing influence who says, the impractical is a necessity, and I want you to spend time nurturing that thing that's like, wild and imaginative, so you never lose it.
Yeah, man. I think I think that's put really well, right? It's not the system's fault because you have to cater to everybody, but it's still like a negative side effect of it, right? And then teachers are doing the best that they can, but it's funny, everyone in your family teachers. My young sister is a teacher for special education. My stepmom is an occupational therapist for special ed. My other sister's getting ready to become a teacher. A couple other teachers in the family, and the more I start talking to teachers, it's like I feel so much empathy for them to be stuck between doing what you love to do, nurturing the next generation, and then doing what you're required to do, which is move them on. And like that battle back and forth, they're not fully equipped. And this is not to point fingers at any parent, but I just don't think a lot of parents are fully equipped if your natural tendency is not childlike creativity, right? That's not what your passion is, right? So ideally, where Unfound Anamnesis, what you and I have talked about, can fit is being able to work with schools, being able to get in a classroom, being able to ask a bunch of kids, hey, or first tell them, this is our world, to kind of welcome them or introduce them to this concept, this premise of a book that we have, and then say, hey, what do you think this classroom's beast would look like? Hey, we need some help here, and being able to nurture creativity for those kids, because I think through creativity of them working together and being like, oh, would our classroom beast be a builder? Would it be an explorer? Would it have wings? Would it climb? I think creativity kind of helps social and self-awareness in a sense, because it's a fun way to back yourself into self-awareness and then social awareness. And then if we provide the right templates, you can ease that conversation from the kid then to the parent. We can provide enough templates for the parents to start to think creatively with their kids. I think it's what Dungeons and Dragons does so well, where you don't just have to be like, hey, who are you? But it's like, it gives you templates of like, are you a rogue? Are you a bard? Are you a ranger? Would you live here, here? And it's like, when we have templates to think in, it makes creativity a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. When we first started talking about your endeavor as a creative person, it was, I think the expression that you use is like, I want to create an escape, or like what did you say exactly? An escape for, do you remember?
Yeah, I want to create like an escape for escapists. I think I was listening to a really cool interview with Shia LaBeouf, and could be a touchy subject now, but I mean, he's very good at what he does. He's a method actor. He really goes into the role, and people were asking him, why is this so important to you? Like, why do you why are you a method actor? Why not just an actor? And he's like, well, at the heart of it, I'm an escapist. He's like, I like to escape from myself to kind of find myself, to go out, lose myself in somebody else and figure out what I can learn from this thing that I'm losing myself in. And I'm like, man, what a cool way to think of creativity. It's like giving people an outlet to escape for a bit. You know, you don't have to fully lose yourself, but escape. Find yourself in a world where there's less rigidity than the one that we live in. And it's like, what if I lived in a world where there was magic? And what kind of magic would I like? And what kind of elements would I use in my day-to-day life? And what would my companions look like? It's like, man, you're starting to ask yourself what you care about, but you do it in a fun way. You do it in this container, right? And then learn about yourself in this container. And then you can come back out of the container and use the lessons that you just use in creativity to bring into your day-to-day life. So that's how I would view, fiction in general. Fiction, fantasy it's an escape.
Yeah. And so there is this sort of like, some people might be listening to this and think, oh, escaping, like there's a negative connotation to this idea of like, you gotta leave your life. But you had a really good perspective on that. And I really like it, and expand on it a little bit. I think if we were to rebrand escapism based on like what you were just saying, so you have your normal life, like everything that's normal, and you're not always able to see the forest through the trees. Like, what is in this life that's good, what's in this life that's not so good. So when you escape into a character, like let's say you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, or you create a character in Unfound Anamnesis, or you go into your favorite novel, there's the introduction of contrast. You said like backing yourself into this place where you can then see yourself from the outside and arrive at this self-awareness. The creative process is always going to be something where you write what you know. It's like not possible to create something, to write something that's like wholly unfamiliar. We have one of our core values with Unfound Anamnesis. It's like, if it's real and if it's true, we'll find a place to introduce this into the story when we're like working with co-creators. And so that's what we use our escape for, is to tell our version of truth, and to explore self-awareness, and to have insights on our own lives. That's like all you can do when you're being creative. So as much as it is an escape, it's more an analysis of self and your values in many cases.
Yeah, I think it gives you a vantage point to look at yourself, and it's like, is that me or is that not me? Because in the same, if that was an argument, let's say, of like escaping, is that bad? You probably don't want to teach meditation either, because anytime that we sit and we meditate, it's us being able to take a vantage point and observe these thoughts that come through our mind, right? Which are not all us. And we get a choice to either say, hey, that's actually a thought that is me. That's a thought that's not me, or that's a thought I don't even need to think of right now, and let's just focus on my breath. But it's like, meditation is an art of a vantage point, right? And I think when it's a fun part about creativity, right? It's like, we got to create bad guys too, but at our heart of hearts, we know that, hey, this is a bad guy, and understand how they could turn into what they turned into, but that's also not me. So to have that discernment, to be able to I think the first step is creativity, because if you never have creativity, you can't experience both sides of the pendulum as much. And then the second step is discernment, which is, okay, is this me or is this not me? Is this me or is this just utter creation? Because I think utter creation is the whole kit and caboodle, good, bad, and everything in between.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially with villains. I always had a hard time writing villains, because I felt like my mom was going to pick up my book and she'd be like, wow, you got a messed up mind. How did you write this villain? Like, you need Jesus. You need help.
Lordy.
Like, oh man. And I would judge myself for how great my villains could potentially be. It's like, how is I capable of coming up with that? I must be a bad person.
This is a great character. I am sadistic. I think that's another thing that I mean, just kind of coming back to anyone that's listening to this that wants to create, I personally think one of the hardest things to push through is people being kind of asking those questions. I just got interviewed for this radio station, and then one of the questions were, are your characters based off those people in your life? And it's like, I mean, yes, a writer writes what they know, and you and I have talked in the past. There may be people in my life that got the ball rolling on a character, but it's never, hey, we have a character named James in our book, and my dad is convinced it's him. And it's like, no, maybe you got the ball going with it because it is a father figure. I mean, I write what I know, but when you're writing a character, what we've learned is like, you want to think of a really good conflicting characteristic for that character. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. What if someone was, the bravest person ever, but an utter wimp, or a complete baby when push came to shove? It's like, well, that's a fun conflicting character. Is he going to be courageous, or is he going to be a wimp, And it's easy. Well, we tend to just be like, we place our identity on something, and they're like, oh, you're writing this based off of me. And that's scary for a writer. So I think a lot of writers, like, I'd encourage you to be like, yeah, these people might get the ball rolling, but that's not who your characters are. My main Joan is not based off of me. She's not based off of you, but I could empathize and maybe see parts of myself in her, because a good character is supposed to hit that in someone, right? And pull that lesson or pull that, thought-provoking idea out of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I kind of see in this childhood to transition back to a kind of bigger picture in your life, like what has kind of led you to here. You've got grandma inspiring you, nurturing you, encouraging you. You go off to college. You've got this like desire to tell stories still. I know you end up in Kenya, and in Kenya, this is sort of where the idea begins, like 9 years ago for these comics.
Yeah.
What was it? Yeah. So how did that all come together? How did you end up in Kenya thinking, I want to write a fantasy?
I'm going to pause after every time you ask a really good question. Because to correct you, when I got to college, like when I got to high school, I went through my rebellious years. I got really big into hockey. I got really big into partying, because that can kind of come with it when you're playing a high school sport like that in a town in Michigan where like hockey's the lifeblood. You kind of attach a sense of identity to it. I was a big, kind of partier hippie in college, and I forgot about my creative ways, to be honest. I really was fascinated with anime when I was in middle school and high school, but it was in the time where it's like, don't ever tell someone that you freak show. So it's like I kind of kept it under wraps, which would have really nourished my creativity, but I lost sight of it. I got really big into sports. I wanted to go into journalism. I went to college, and I worked in an internship where I ran my own business and sold books door to door. And then my identity became capitalist Dillon. Like, how can I build a dynasty and lead people and be a great manager and be a great salesperson and help people make good decisions for themselves? I wanted to do it for the right reasons, but also in the background, I was like, I want to build something. And I completely lost my creative. I had no creative outlet other than, I guess, hockey and like rollerblading were my creative outlets. And I was lucky enough to find my girlfriend, now wife, through doing all that. So I wouldn't take it back for the world. I think it also gave me the drive to want to create something, what we're doing right now. But my girlfriend at the time, she was doing the internship too, and she got recruited to work with a consulting company, transformational sales consulting company that only worked with socially minded businesses in third world countries. So she got her first contract in Kenya. I was like, hey, I don't want to live in the States and you're halfway across the world. I want to come with you. So I traveled, got closer to her, and started working with this company. And then my love for religions and mythologies really took root. I started reading about different religions and mythologies towards the end of college, and I was always a little into that. But being able to immerse myself in places and learn more about religions and why people learn and do things the way they do based on like this awesome allegory for life, I was like, dang, I spent some time in Indonesia and learned more about Islam. I spent time in India, and I had read the Bhagavad Gita and read the Tao Te Ching and the Analects, and just seeing how it shapes people's lives. I just love the fact of, what if I could spark that? What if I could teach through allegory? What if I could teach a lesson through this wild concept, this monkey that lifted the Himalayas in Hinduism, and how it teaches people to master their body and mind? It just seemed fascinating. So then when I was in Kenya, this idea started to kind of bubble back up, I guess I should say. Did I answer the question?
Yeah. Interesting that we talk about escapism, and then when I was pretty young, I remember thinking it's kind of weird that I am a certain religion, more or less because I was born in a certain place.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like born in Southeast Michigan, not too far from you in Port Huron, and parents are Christians, therefore I'm a Christian. It's like all these things are default. And there's always there's a little bit of curiosity on, yes, certainly I'm told on one hand, like, this is the way, this is the truth, the way, and the life. And
capital T.
Yeah, all capitals. And yet there's very much this curiosity around, I want to turn the stone a few times and see if there is some truth to this. Let me look around to see if this is, like the essence of what I believe to be true is just maybe one way of looking at the truth. And my town, Brighton, Michigan, at the time growing up, was like, I looked at the Wikipedia stats at one point. It was like 98.1% white. And it was like, essentially everybody was just like me. So there's never any contrast. And so certainly, like, going and reading stories, there's contrast in fantasy stories, but there's also just contrast, escapism from everything that you've always known, especially growing up in a community like that, like getting to a place that's so different. It's like, world shaking. Literally, it's like you can't just take these things for granted, because these people are essentially, literally, and spiritually, philosophically speaking a different language.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of an amazing way to shake things up, and then to realize when things get shaken up that there are some core values underlying all of the world religions.
I think, again, coming back to self-awareness, I grew up Catholic, and I heard the story over and over again. And it got to a point where I really wasn't hearing the story. I was like listening, but I wasn't really hearing it, or what do you want to say, hearing but not listening, whatever. It wasn't really resonating with me because I'd heard it over and over again. So then when I'm able to travel or take classes and learn about something I've never learned about before, and be like, oh, this is the way that these people look at life. This is the way that Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma made the earth for you guys. It gave me a different vantage point. And I think a lot of people get scared of that. It's like, well, I don't want my kids experiencing something outside of that. But it helps us figure out who the hell we are. Because then I can see this vantage point, over here. I can see the vantage point I grew up with over here. And I can say, where does Dillon fit? Which way do what do I gravitate toward? Is it 100% here? Is it 100, or is it kind of somewhere in the middle? So to provide people more outlets to think outside the box that they've grown up in, I think allows them to expand their box. And as you expand your box and shrink it, you get a sense of who the hell you are. And, coming back to the book, it's like a lot of people don't know the biggest question I think a lot of people ask themselves right now is like, what's my purpose in life? What am I here to do? Well, it's very difficult to know what you're here to do if you don't know who you are. So first thing you need to do is get outside those comfort zones, learn things that aren't normal to you, to figure out who you are. Because when you figure out who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, your values, you have a better way to aim towards what you're called to do in life. And I feel I'm called to create and to be that fool that's making mistakes, but leading from the front, that people can look to and be like, I'm gonna follow suit.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, man. This is related to what you're saying as far as like figuring out your identity. There's this business that's just down the street from my house. It's called Total Demolition. And I think there's probably, and every time I drive by it, I think of this. I think of the proprietor. I've made up this image of the business owner. Of it's basically me, but somebody who's just like leaned into their nature of breaking things. In the Unfound Anamnesis comment, there would be a builder breaker for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking in my head.
Yeah, for sure. Total demolition. But there was a time in my life where, I'm analyzing my characteristics. I'm comparing myself to people that I look up to. And I'm thinking, I am lesser than because I'm really good. It seems like I'm just like really good at breaking things. I'm the boy who breaks things. Anything I touch, there's the Midas touch, but then there's the Matt's touch. And they're opposites. And then I drive past this business in a time in my life where I'm beating myself up for why does everything I get involved in at this point just like crumble, fall apart? That wasn't really true. Like I'm kind of looking at a narrow perspective on a lot of things in my life. But I drove past this business and I see total demolition, and I think, here's somebody, instead of looking at their tendency to break things as a bad thing, they got a parking lot full of cars. They've made a whole business out of it. It's like their identity is not rooted in like, I'm the boy who breaks things, and there's something wrong about this. It's like, don't make it wrong, make it work for you. And clearly they were. And so, I don't know. I just think that's like, I don't really think of myself as the boy who breaks things anymore. I figured some stuff out, but there was kind of like an aha moment in that where I realized like not trying to be something other than what I am, and accepting what I am, and realizing like we're all different. Everybody's got kind of their own set of characteristics. Everyone's going to be doing something different if we lean into it. But we do spend a lot of time in our youth looking at each other and saying, I want to be more like that person, or this other person, and rejecting what comes
And
after.
I think if it could get to a point of like, hey, I really like this part of someone, and maybe there's a little bit of me that's like that, that's great. Rather than, I think what we do as society sometimes is we idolize somebody too much, and we put them on this pedestal, and then we say we must be this person. Like right now, if you want to be successful, you have to be Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk mindset. And anytime you see a reel or anytime you see a YouTube video, it's aligned towards that. If you want to gain everybody's attention, it's like, I don't know, there could be something about their personalities that I could gravitate towards, but I want to do things my own way. It's like, without being a breaker. I mean, I remember when, after I was in Kenya for 3.5 years, and then I came back, and that's when we started working together at self-publishing school, is when I really was like, I want to work at self-publishing school because I want to write a book. And it sounds like these guys are helping people write books. And I was able to learn from Chandler Bolt, plug if you're listening. I was able to learn from Rami Vance, specifically about fiction. And it's like, man, I started writing this book with something in my mind, really the cosmos of Unfound Anamnesis, not the world of Bastunia, which is the book that we have now, Tales of Bastunia. But I was thinking Unfound Anamnesis, and I started writing a book towards it. And it's like, man, I needed that to get broken down. I needed to go out and make mistakes, because if you don't go out in creativity, if you don't go out and make mistakes, you're never going to create. I think a lot of people get paralysis by analysis and never start because they want their creativity to be awesome. But it's like that breaker in you, it's like, go crash and burn. I remember when I first started making this book, it's like, dude, I was crashing and burning constantly with the concept of it and how I was outlining the story. So again, it's being able to look at that part of yourself and being like, oh, this is where I can let it shine. Right. Yeah. It's not me, but this is where I can let it shine.
Yeah. So in like September of 2019, I was an intern, finishing up an internship, hoping to get a job full-time at self-publishing school. And there was this idea that was kind of floated out there by you. You were managing, I don't know if it was the critical number or what, or some random incentive, but it was like, let's get 10 of us on a team of like 22 or 23 at this point, 10 people to write books. 50% of our company is going to write a book before the end of the year. And so I remember writing the first word on October 1st. You may have, like been working on your book here or there before that, but in any case, October 1st, that's when the initiative started. I published my first one, December 26th. I barely made it. Happiness Gap, your first nonfiction, was published right around that same time, just in the end of December.
I think it was December. I was starting before you, so this is not a competition. I think it was December, the middle of December. It's like, I look back, I'm like, it's probably the worst time. It's like the only time of the year we say don't publish a book is like right before the holidays, and that's when I did it. Yeah, it was, because I remember my mom was holding it for Christmas. So it had to be late November, early December. I published The Happiness Gap. Yeah.
That's right. I remember reading it on the way back for Christmas break that year. So yeah. So both of us kind of got this, the monkey off our back, to take your expression, that you invented.
I came up with that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Thank you. Make sure we have keep this recording so everyone knows. Monkey off your back, Dillon, Barr.
Yeah. And so we got the monkey off our back. We'd written nonfiction, but both of us were always interested in stories, in writing fiction, novels, or whatever else. And so you've been toying around with, I kind of want to go back to, you're in Kenya. The idea of Ubuntu in this comic is starting to take form, a story about a god. But what did the story look like for Tales of Bastunia? I mean, obviously it's changed a lot till we got to this point, but what did it look like at the very beginning?
The original concept was, and you said it when you were introducing me, is like, I love frameworks. Like, I exist through frameworks. Being able to I have a partner that I work with. She's very woo-woo, and she's like, it's crystal energy. Like, you just like to put form around things to be able to play in it. I learned it when I was working with WRP, bringing that back up. And it's like, that was one of the allegories. I'm like, man, what if I could teach these cool frameworks of present moment awareness and being aware of your mindset and creating your own reality? What if I could turn that into an allegory? And then obviously that, coupled with my fascination of mythologies and gods, it's like, man, what if the premise, right, of like, what if, our existence was put together by these creative gods that architect our entire life to help us make the decisions we make, to gently guide us towards the path we're supposed to, that take none of the credit and allow us humans to have the credit of, oh no, I want to write a book because that's what Dillon thinks. It's like, what if there were frameworks that these gods were able to use to progress humanity across the cosmos? And what if a virus started within that, and this cosmos got separated between beings that were on this path that was guided to them by a god and beings that just lived in utter chaos? And there was this one god, Ubuntu, who you bring up, was kind of going to be that person that brought balance to this war between good and evil, right? It sounds like it's a trope, right? It sounds like Anakin Skywalker, if you think of Star Wars, but I wanted to put it in a kind of a different context, and started writing that. And this God that lost his way and has to find his self back into the light, and in that is brought into this great war, and in the mix of finding himself but being called to do something great. And I started writing it, and that was the original concept. And probably going to take this away from you. You and I then get together because you wanted to write your fiction book. I believe it was more of like a medieval-esque book, right?
Yep.
And we would get together. We called it Fundamental Bros of Fiction. We were getting mental about fiction, fundamental. And we would meet every week and start talking about our book. It'd be like, hey, this is where I'm getting with my plotting. This is where you're getting with your plotting. We go back and forth.
It's pandemic time too.
Exactly. So pandemic, it's all done via Zoom, right? In my sweatpants as we have a beer together. And that was the original concept of what I wanted to create. I can go on more with it, but that would be, to answer your question, that's the original concept that you and I start talking about.
Right.
Yeah. 4 years
and then
ago.
It gets, there's two conversations that I feel like were pivotal. One of them, I'll say the one that I remember, and then I'll kick it over to you to talk about some of the advice that you were given by Rami. I remember, because our nonfiction books had come out around the same time, I always felt like there was this sort of like admiration, yes, about my book, but also like spite or something, like anger toward me, because you felt like my book was really well written, which led to a
Yes.
comment as we were. Thank you for your spite, by the way. I take it as a
Very good.
compliment.
It was powerful spite because you're so good at what you do.
Well, then you paid me this compliment, which I brushed off entirely, shot it down entirely at this point. You're like, man, do you ever think like, I'd love to be like the guy who just plots the book and then like someone else writes it. Man, that would just be perfect. Wouldn't that be perfect? Like, yeah, I hope, good luck finding the person. Like, would you ever consider like, no, definitely not. I'm working on my own projects, man.
Mhm. Yep.
And then that was it. I think I shot the conversation down about as brutally as I could. Maybe it wasn't so brutal, but
No, it
still,
was brutal, man. I remember
I
it.
was not open to it whatsoever. I mean, we're meeting every week to talk about your book as much as my own.
Right.
Um, and then around that same time, so that is sort of sitting, percolating. I thought that idea was totally dead. I'd shot it down, but clearly now we know that it wasn't. Then you had this conversation with Rami, one of the coaches here at Self Publishing, and he said something about, "Oh, your main character is a god."
Mhm.
Well, what did he say to you there?
No one wants to no one can relate to a god. No one wants to follow a god. Dude, like, and this comes back to anyone listening of like, man, I really want to create, I really want to do fiction. It's like you put yourself out there knowing you're going to fall on your face a lot of times and get back up because you know you love doing it. Quick, and like, I played hockey. I still play hockey. I love hockey. I'm a goalie. And I have went through concussions, getting hit in the head with 90 mile an hour slap shots. I've taken shots off the stomach where my pads weren't. I've taken shots off the legs where my pads weren't. I've taken people running into me, just bruises and all that. But I don't stop playing hockey because I love the game. I love the feeling I get playing the game. And I think it's the same thing with creativity. Like, you are going to get hit in the head. You are going to take bruises. Because literally, like, I had plotted out Matt's 3 whole books. I love plotting. I love kind of being like, ooh, and then this happens, and then this happens. And it fits the typical story structure of like inciting incident, call to action, fall on your face, get back up, climax, all that. 3 books. And I talk with Rami and he's like, no one wants to follow a god. And this is boring. And I was like, damn. And then also talking with you and being like, hey man, I love plotting. I'm not a good writer. A conflicting characteristic for myself is I think I have really good lessons to teach, but when it comes to writing or speaking eloquently, I drop the ball, and that's nothing to me at all. It's just who I am, right? But talking with you and getting that no, and then hearing that from Rami, it's like, dude, I just started 3 long books that are fully plotted that mean nothing. It was like a ground zero moment and asking myself, where do I go from here? But again, the passion and creativity was too strong. It's like, I know this is what I want to do. Those were 2 really tough moments, I think, for me as an author, as a writer.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it seemed like you'd had this reaction to that that ultimately was pivotal. I mean, you were reading graphic novels at the time, maybe some comics, some other things, manga, and I honestly don't remember where the idea came from. If I validated the idea or if I created the idea, more so, but I'm thinking more validated. Where we were in a meeting, fundamental bros of fiction, we were talking about it. Maybe the wind had been taken out of the writing prose sales a bit, and the idea got kicked around. Like, well, what if you took everything that we've done, plotting out these books, and made it into graphic novels? And I felt like it was this idea that was sort of floated, and it was just like in suspended animation for a bit. And it wasn't like a hell yes immediately, was it? It was still thinking, this is going to be a novel.
Yeah, it was, and it was either that happened, but what really was the nail in the good coffin, that the nail that was like, holy shit, we brought your girlfriend into our sessions for a bit, and it went from, and she made the name, not us, it went from fundamental bros of fiction to fundamental hoes of fiction, because we were all hoes.
That's hers. Yeah,
that's her. Don't cancel me. But I remember Bella came into this fiction group we were doing, and you would always tell your story like kind of like in a poetic fashion, like you were almost speaking it into existence. And I type out all of my, then this happens, and then this happens, and then I started like writing, and then it's like, and then a cut scene to the face, to this person's face, and then this person walks in the room, and we pan out. And Bella was reading it, and she goes, man, this really kind of, I'm not reading this like a plot to a book. She's like, I'm reading this like a scene to a show or a movie. Like it felt more like a script. And that sat with me. And I'm like, oh, that is how I'm thinking. Because at the time I had got reintroduced to mangas, and that's how I was thinking of it. And I'm like, I think it hit me one night. I'm like, why don't I try to do this? I know I can't draw, but I can find someone that can do that. I know I can't write, but I could find someone that can do that. It's like, why don't I just do something that I really love to do? And that was that aha moment of, I want to turn this into a comic. Why don't I just do my own thing? I don't have to make a novel because everyone else is making a novel. I can do the things that I want to do. And then I started, I know you're pulling out right now. And then I started looking more on YouTube of how do you make a graphic novel? How do you do comics? What is the process of it? And moving from a script, right, or a plot to a storyboard, to a more defined plot, to a final, to a sketch done by a professional, to a final piece of work. And I think you're going to embarrass me right now and show me, show people something.
I was gonna say, like, what do you mean you can't draw?
Okay.
Those of you who are listening to the audio, we're looking at stick figures. We're looking at, if my 6-year-old niece drew a stick figure storyboard, that's what we're looking at.
Do that when I was like 29, man. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna start thinking of this, but it's wild though. We can talk about finding the illustrator. Our illustrator has never seen those pictures. Thank God. Do you want to hold the very first one up again?
Yeah.
No. 1 second. It was the first one that you held. You can see it's in pen. It's in pen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's done in pen, right? There's this young girl following this guy holding her mom. Her mom turns around and looks back. She's trying to pull at the guy. And then all of a sudden there's this, more towards the middle, there's this big guy that comes into the scene holding this sword. And seeing that this is what it can turn into, I don't know if you can see my screen now, of
we see both.
young girl going out to try to find her mom. Her mom looking back, her pulling at this guy, and then this big guy coming. Our illustrator saw none of this, but was able to take what I had made, which I then turned into a plot to give to him, to turn it into this. It blows my mind that it's like, there's a weird connection there.
They're so similar.
That's surprising.
Pretty wild. Yeah, I never saw those side by side, and didn't realize that our illustrator's name's Evan, had never seen those things. So just to talk on the process of finding Evan, this was kind of a winding road. We went through a couple of illustrators before we landed on Evan, and we're blessed. He's incredible, and his industry knowledge is just like second to none. We got a consultant as much as we got an illustrator.
Yeah,
there you go.
Just wild.
So yeah, let's for anybody listening who's maybe thinking about doing their own comic, or they're just curious of the genesis of Tales of Bastunia, let's talk about that a little bit. How do we find this illustrator?
I think first and foremost, we had done enough work. Like what I would recommend anyone that wants to write a comic is it takes time. and start to lightly plot your story outline. It's why I love learning from Rami, love working at working with self-publishing school, because I was able to get the foundational knowledge of a good story. And then that allowed me to plot. You and I plotted our first 15 chapters, which are full books with comics, right? Our first 15 books are pretty much fully plotted. And then after I plot them lightly, I literally chicken scratch horrible stick figures. I say, okay, if this is the first chapter, what would it look like? And how would I want the panels to look, right? And then I would kind of draw out each of these panels to make sure it fits 25 pages. Typically, a comic is anywhere between 18 to 25 pages a chapter. So I'm like, how can I make this fit within 25 pages? And I would chicken scratch it. And so the first thing I would say is have product to work with. Like, we had 7 chapters fully storyboarded. We had 15 chapters plotted, 7 chapters storyboarded, and like the first 5 of them even further plotted out. Because once you storyboard it, you want to basically replot it and say, hey, panel 1, this person looks, panel 2, this, full panel, this. That's the first thing. Second thing is you got to put it out into the universe of, like, I remember writing out my goals and saying, Matt and I have found an illustrator that works well with us and understands and can challenge us to grow and sees the big picture vision. Put your goals out there or they're not happening. And then it came to like just falling on my face again. I think you and I had found someone that had lived in your Airbnb, or knew some. Yeah, knew someone. Can you speak to that? And then I'll tap back in of then how we find Evan. The first illustrator we had.
Yeah, to fill in a quick little plot hole to bring us up to the modern day. After working with you consistently throughout the pandemic, every week, my novel had taken some form, and I don't know if it was just like different things that I was reading and different things that I was going through in life, but instead of working on my novel, I started working on a different book called The Detourist. It's like a follow-up, second nonfiction book. It's right over here above my shoulder. And in the process of writing The Detourist, which took a year, all momentum was lost from my novel. And frankly, like, as a writer, some people would refer to them as the muses. Some people would think like Dillon. Elizabeth Gilbert wrote about, like, ideas are these sentient things that are searching for a host to carry them through to fruition. And I don't know, there's probably a lot of ways to look at it, but in any case, this novel, the idea either went and found another host, or the muses said, this guy's not gonna do it, or whatever. And it left me in this position where I was like, I still really want to write stories. And we'd still been talking about the Unfound Anamnesis here, off and on. And I honestly, I don't remember when I said yes to the call, but eventually I did answer it, which I felt like I was kind of more playing this behind the scenes role. Like, this is Dillon's thing. I wasn't calling it our thing yet, but let me try to support as much as possible. And I had a room for rent on Airbnb, and so people were coming in and out of my house. And for a while, I thought, like, man, my house is like, I was calling it the cornucopia of requirement, like this kind of woo idea, like the room of requirement in Harry Potter. It's like, if somebody says to me something that they need, it'll be provided somehow through this house. It's just like had this magical ability for the Airbnb guest to show up with like, oh, you were looking for an illustrator. Well, this girl shows up, and she stays with her friend, and got to talking about what I was working on. And I can't remember, I was just like, hey, do you happen to know any illustrators, or are you an illustrator? And she's like, oh, well, my husband literally just graduated from illustration college. Probably had a better name than that, but
no, it didn't.
Maybe not. Yeah. And so his name was also Matt, but we call him Nick just so that it's not confusing. So Nick, he came in, and just right off the bat, I mean, we tried to make it work with this guy. We had arranged everything. We had many meetings with him, got him drawing some initial characters, and he created these featurettes so we could see like what our characters were going to look like. His style was a little bit more kiddish. Like, there's a couple of TV show cartoons that his style was more compared to.
Yeah, I can't think of it, but anytime I remember looking at Joan, I got like Kim Possible vibes.
Yeah,
if anyone remembers that.
For sure. Definitely more cartoony, and a little bit just, I don't know, more childlike. Childish. I don't know. A child would like it.
Yeah.
And then eventually we started. We were a little disillusioned on what an illustrator would be able to do for us. I think
we gave a lot to him, and I think it got to a point where he was just like, guys, I can't do this, which is cool. It's like, it was so tough for me though, because it was right after I started writing my goals out. I was like, we're gonna find an illustrator. It was like 2 weeks later that you're like, hey, let's talk to this guy. And I really do think this is when it became like this collaborative experience between you and I, and like we start to figure out both of our strengths. Pat, this is you passing the torch to me. Yeah. It didn't work out with him, and I remember we had a close colleague at the time that said, hey, you should get in this Facebook group for illustrators that are always looking for work. He was born in the Philippines. His parents were missionaries. He was born in the Philippines, and it's this Filipino, Eastern manga, Eastern art style Facebook group. He's like, just post in it and tell people what you're looking for and what you're willing to pay. And we weren't willing to pay a shit ton at the time, but we were willing to pay. And I know I reached out and I said, hey, this is what we're looking for. This is our long-term vision. We want to do 10 books a year if we can. And so many people are like, hey, please work with me. We love this. Here's my ideas, and throwing themselves. We had to kind of like whittle through some of these people, and they gave good art. Like, they're very good at what they do, but it would have been hard for it to be collaborative. It would be, hey, you tell me what to draw and I will draw it. And the challenge, just for illustrators, is to find an illustrator that can do, characters as well as scenery is difficult. And we found people that would do great scenery, but not characters, great characters, but not scenery. So I talked to my D&D guild, my dungeon master, because I was playing D&D at the time. And he's like, and he does books with great illustrations. He basically does 5e compatible books for Dungeons and Dragons. And he's like, I use this Facebook group for finding my illustrators. He's like, you can, put the same post you put in your other one, put it in here, see what you get. And it was filled with people from Europe and people from South America. And I took the same approach of what I was asking from people from the Philippines, and they were really excited about it. So I'm like, all right, I'll just copy and paste the post. Hey, we're looking to create comics, and would love anyone in here that could give me some couple character designs. I'd love to pay for character designs. We want to do 10 comics a year if possible. Like, ignorant. And the post in the group blew up for all the wrong reasons. It blew up because the first 10 comments were, you are so dumb, you idiot. How dare you ask us for this much work under these circumstances? You don't need an illustrator, you need a team. You don't know the pressure you put on illustrators by asking this. You're the problem with the industry. And it had all of these comments had all these likes. And I was like, I remember getting back to all of them. I felt horrible. I'm like, this isn't my intent. They were all nice after they realized I wasn't coming in there I think they're used to like brash business people asking for things. And that wasn't me, but I got yelled at. And I apologized, and they understood. And they're like, oh, just so you know, this is probably more of what your expectations should be. And, I grew in my expectations, but it was a huge help because it got so much hate and so many comments for hate. It also clicked in the algorithm where a bunch of people just started putting they're like, yeah, reach out to me. So it had like 100 and some comments on it. And through those comments, I reached out to, I think, 3 of them. One of them was Evan, very chill guy, like so stoic and calm and to himself, but very intellectual, works for LinkedIn as a software engineer. Met him, and he put together a couple of our characters based on basically what we'd do is I would kind of get an idea. I would tell it to you. You would basically type it out. Like, here's her backstory. Here's her likes. Here's her dislikes. Here's how she interacts. This is kind of who we see. and he did incredible, man. And we found him through it. And I mean, the rest has just been amazing with the work that he's put in. But again, this comes back to this lesson of, I think a lot of people, specifically with art or any creativity, they see a finished product. I mean, we see everything with AI right now. It's like we see a finished product and we just don't think anything of it. We don't think of, Evan talks about this, we don't see all of, on his side, all of the hours of like hurt hands and trying to be creative when you can't be creative that goes into his art. It's not just a finished product. And I think a lot, same as the, you know, the creators of the idea with you and me, it's like a lot of people can see this book and be like, oh, cool, you got to pay, you were lucky enough to pay good money and put this. It's like they don't see all of the failure that goes into it, and falling on your face and having a book idea get torn to shreds and not being able to write and reaching out to people that like, hey, I don't want to do that. They're like trying to find an illustrator and getting ripped. Like they don't see that part of the journey. So if you're going to create, like really ask yourself, do you want to create? But that's me getting off my pedestal or whatever, my platform, my soapbox. It's me getting off my soapbox and yeah, over to you.
We both nice. Back to you.
Shut up, Dillon.
No prompting necessarily. No, both of us like I look at creativity, and I do still very much have a Christian vocabulary to the way that I articulate my spirituality. So I think of clearly we have a very creative God, and so time spent in the act of creativity to me is indistinguishable from prayer. It's time that I spend with my creator, doing, you know, basically using the tools that the creator's given me. And so that sort of disposition, like going through life and saying, anytime I get to be creative, I'm spending time with my Father, is like, sure, there's definitely a destination, you know, and we've got grand visions for time spent in schools and, you know, like 45 plus books mapped out, already talking about more talking. I mean, this is something where we've even thrown around the number 1,000 books published in 10 years. A huge, scary number that involves, we're going to transition to talking about boundlessness here in a minute. But that is like, it's such a big number that if we didn't enjoy the process of creativity, we would be insane. It's only a number that I get excited by because in order to do that, I've got to really commit my entire life to this act of being creative. So to chase a destination creatively, to imagine someday I really want to be a full-time author and not understand that what that looks like is waking up day in and day out and actually being creative, then it's just not going to happen. You know, this reality where we're full-time creatives will sneak up on us because we're already sort of like embodying like that. The way we live our lives is in alignment with that. It's not here yet. I really truly don't see a destination. Just gonna like spend my life in the act.
Yeah, the destination seems so far off and so scary. It's like, I don't know if we just keep making progress towards it, we're going to land someplace awesome. And it's really cool. Like, I love the partnership that we have. You speak through the vernacular of Christianity, through your spirituality. And I don't know what the hell language I speak when I talk about spirituality, but you spending time with the Father and your creativity, it's bring it full circle. It's like when I'm being creative, I'm spending time with my grandma, the person that nurtured this creativity. And that, like, I think what's the cliche term? People die twice, once physically, and the second time when we stop talking about them, or in my opinion, living into their values. If I'm living into creativity, I mean, my grandma never, you said this earlier, I'm hanging out with her more now than I'd ever done in my life by leaning into the values that she taught me. Yeah. It's a pursuit.
So you made the invitation years ago to me, hey, I'd like to collaborate. Somewhere around that same time, you introduced me to the idea of boundlessness. Now we're working with an illustrator. There's 3 of us on the cover, but if you open the book to the acknowledgments there, which I think is in the back, I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us in the acknowledgments. And an anticipation that that number and acknowledgments of people that are involved in this process is going to go up and up and up and up. Now, boundlessness, first of all, I'd love a definition of this term for people who haven't heard this before. So if you want to share that.
Yeah. Honestly, definitely, I've never had like a clear, concise definition, but it's like not knowing where you stop and where something or somebody else begins. So I was reading a really good book called A Yogi's Guide to Joy by Sadhguru. And this guy's if you ever seen him, he is like the definition of a yogi. Doesn't really formulate to any specific religion. He speaks through the language of Hinduism because that's what he grew up in, but just kind of the spiritual yogi that speaks to people, and wrote a good book. And he was reflecting back on the story of it on his life, where he would go to this mountain in the Karnataka region of India, and he would just meditate every single day. And some days it would be really good. Some days he's in his head the entire time. And he said one time that he started meditating, he got to a point where he felt he did not know where he stopped. His body stopped, and the rock in which he sat on began. He lost that. He lost that rigidity of life. He kind of sunk into being one with everything around him. And he said that when he came to, it was just tears were strolling down his face because he was utter joy of existing with everything around him. I literally remember reading it and it gave me chills. But then right after, I'm like, yeah, that's never going to be it for me. Like, I haven't started my journey of meditation. I'm not that passionate. I love meditating, but I'm not that passionate where I see myself getting to there physically. But it did spark this idea of getting to boundlessness mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I think is really, really cool. Being able to empathize with somebody and really feel what they're feeling, I think, is a beauty, right? Being able to learn. I've learned so much from you, man, and I bring it into my own life, whether I know it or not. That's a piece of Matt that is with me. Like, we're kind of losing that. Well, who did I think of that? And Matt teaching. That's, for me, that's boundlessness. I want to be able to teach people things that they can take into their own life. I don't need my name attached to it, but they can take it, and that's a piece of me with them. And that's boundlessness. That's like not knowing where I stop and where somebody else begins, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, and living towards that as much as possible daily is what lights me up. Like, I never wake up and I'm pissed about going to work because I get a chance to do that, and I remind myself that daily. So that's boundlessness to me.
Not without its challenges. I think we do live in a society where people want to say, like, this is the Matt Emmorey method to enlightenment, and it's just like slapping our names on things, which is a tendency in Bastunia, the comic world, of builders. They always want to put their name on everything they build until some peer builders come along. So before, you mentioned your colleague, your coworker, the one that might speak a little bit more in a woo language, said something about like what was it? Crystal
energy, creating foundations. Yeah.
So these foundations, the crystal energy. When you said that, I thought one of the better ways that I've found to like articulate this idea between a masculine and feminine energy, not male, female, but just like the constant structural, is that you're building this dance floor, right? It's this structure that then allows people a place to dance. And so that's I think if we do this comic well, then we provide a lot of places for people to get into a flow and to let their creative energy shine and flow and evolve and more, lack of a better word, like, dance around. And so that is, I think, your area of brilliance around this boundlessness is here is an idea. I'm not necessarily the origin, although having people point out like, hey, what you taught me was really great, is never is always appreciated.
For sure.
It's not about the validation necessarily. The appreciation is appreciated, but it's this, and you've always carried this energy about it. This like, here's the structure, and it's rigid enough that there is some rules. It's like the game of soccer. If you had 22 kids running around a field with no rules, however many kids are on a soccer team at once, I don't know.
No one cares.
No one's, soccer.
It's soccer. I'm kidding.
uh, if there were no rules, then people are going to get hurt. They're not really going to have that great of a time. If there's too many rules, then no one's going to have fun either. So finding this like delicate sweet spot where there's just enough structure to like really bring out the fun. You've done a great job of inviting me in and hearing my ideas and finding ways to integrate them.
Yeah, it all comes back to the foundations, right? And I think if we can create a playground, a soccer field, where that has enough rules that people are like, oh, okay, I can think this way. I think I talked about earlier, like templates to look and have a lens to look at something. It's easier for them to play within, right? Yeah. So coming up with that framework for them, I think is it's the end all for this.
Yeah. Okay. So enough abstract talk. Let's actually talk about the premise of Tales of Bastunia.
Yeah.
So we know Joan, main character. We know Buntu, the god. I guess starting there, give us a little idea on what this story is all about.
Yeah. So again, it kind of started, everything started with Buntu. That was the original, the gods, this concept of the gods. And he was this main god, but that's going to bring balance to the cosmos and all that. And, my mentor at the time telling me, hey, no one wants to relate with a god. You got to find a story. So I wanted to attach Buntu to someone that's more human-like, which is Joan. And then from that, and honestly, this is where I think you and I got really collaborative together. I had the cosmos down, but it's definitely been you and I creating this world. So I'm going to do my best to kind of give the premise of this society, and then you can come in and fill in any blanks. But the concept of Bastunia is, what if we lived in a world where everyone knew their calling in life throughout their entire life? And the way that they know it is because they're gifted a spiritual beast at birth from their main god. And it's a totem to constantly remind yourself what you were put here to do. What is my life's calling? These people in this world know their path in life, know what they're meant to do, because they always have this totem to look at. And really, there's three paths of callings in Bastunia. There is the builder path, and those are for the people that look around and see this world and everything there is for us, and they're filled with nothing but curiosity. And they say, wow, what can I make of all of this? They kind of look to their God and they're like, wow, thank you so much for all this. What can I make of it? Like, how can I leave my name in the annals of history and stamp my legacy? How can I make something that outlives me? How can I create something that outlives me? Those are the builders. And they're born with a builder beast who's the spiritual beast that can literally create matter from matter and construct great buildings and construct great pieces of architecture and the societies for people to live in, right? That's the builder path. Second path is the explorer path. And those are the people that look into the world of Bastunia, and they see everything that the god has given them. And at their core, they're filled with nothing but wonder. And they're like, wow, how can I just understand what's been given to me? How can I get further away from who I am and closer to whatever this source is to really find myself? And those are the beasts that are the winged beasts, or the great diving beasts, or the great climbing beasts that are meant to explore and travel. And so these people can map out the world of Bastunia and learn lessons and come back to tell tales to grow the society, right? Really get outside themselves and explore. And then the third path is the path of the defender. And these are the people that are, born into this world, and they would be the ones that look at everything that God has given them, everything around, all the resources of the world, and see it as a huge gift and just be filled with nothing but love for what they were given. And they really say, how can I preserve this? I've been given a gift. How can I preserve and protect this with everything that I got for myself and the people that are close to me, my brothers and sisters of this world? They're the defenders, and their beasts are the knights. They're like the cool looking beasts, the shields, the beasts that protect the society from these opposing threats that come from within the world and from the cosmos themselves. So you have these three paths. explorers, builders, and defenders, and they lived in harmony for a while. And some people were actually born with multiple paths. It's like once they fully lived their builder dharma, or calling, they got a different calling. And for the longest time, people were born with multiple, and then after a while, people began to only be born with one. And the God in his mind was thinking, all right, you would really know who you are, but them being humans and being prone to mistakes, there became this separation of, well, I'm a builder, you're a defender, we're going to start to part ways. I am that. This is who I am, rigidity, right? Not discovery. And I learned that from a friend, but it's part of me now. And then it's, 10 years ago in Bastunia, the God goes missing and people stop being born with callings. And it's kind of, it's the time of the fall. So there's just nothing but chaos going on right now. It's like, for the longest time, people are born, your calling in life. And these last 10, 13 years, people are born and they don't know their calling. They don't know what they're here to do. And one man who is kind of the hero of this world, the weight was put on his shoulders to bring the God back. And he took on the calling. His name's James. He's like, you know what? I'm going to bring the God back. If he's not gone, he's just lost. He's at the top of this mountain, and I'm going to go find him, and I'm going to bring him back. Don't worry, everybody. And everybody puts their hope in him. And he, spends, years going on to try to find where this God is at the top of the mountain. No one's ever got to the top. He says, I'm going to get there first, and dedicates his life. And in the process, he leaves his wife and child back at home. His wife turns into just a stay-at-home mom, and she feels like she's called to do much more. And this young girl grows up without a dad and with a mom that's really struggling with where she fits in the world, because she feels like she's been kind of, left to just do the mundane things. And James makes it all the way to the top of this great mountain, destined to find the God and bring him back. And he gets to the top to find absolutely nothing. Looks around, he's like, holy shit, I staked my reputation on this, and there's nothing up here. The only thing that he sees is this really small seed sitting on a rock, and he holds on to it with just a bunch of hope. Comes back, and he goes from hero to zero quick. It's like how quickly they build him up, they'll tear him down, because this society put their faith in him, and he came back empty-handed. Comes back to a society that hates him, a wife that has left him, and a daughter who is alone as a young girl, living with the neighbor at the time, and has lost her leg, which we'll learn in the book, and hates him, absolutely hates him. So he's a broken man. And the book starts off, the main character is the daughter, Joan, being the main character, a no beast, someone that has no beast. Her dad was this hero, and they have a very difficult relationship right now. She doesn't like beastborns because they think they're better than no beasts. She doesn't like her dad because he's the epitome of beastborns. And she doesn't have a beast. She doesn't know what her calling is in life, until one day she goes to school and she comes home and she hears this kid getting beat up, and she decides to help him. And in the process, this necklace that she wears, which holds the seed that her dad found at the top of the mountain, begins to glow. And one thing leads to another. Because this seed glows so much, she's able to get out of this fight with these two bullies that were picking on this kid. And she comes home, and the seed erupts. And out of the seed not only comes the first beast, or the first calling in the last 13 years, but it's the missing God himself. And it's up to Joan, her dad, and her now new friend that she saved from the alley to bring the God back to the top of the mountain and restore hope back to Bastunia.
Amazing. So the three paths: the explorers, the defenders, the builders. This is one of those frameworks that we were talking about. One of these bases for you to kind of see yourself within the world of Bastunia, to create yourself as a character, or to create characters. And we've actually put together a quiz. I'll include it in the link, some links within the show notes and the show description. You can just check out the link tree. It's literally called Where You Fit in Bastunia, where you can find out, based on the God is going to take who you are into consideration. You're not going to be like, man, I love exploring. And the guy's just like, nah, sorry, builder. Your philosophies are definitely at play with which path that you're walking. So you can answer some questions. Maybe you already know. We can actually take an assessment and find out, which path am I on right now? And we like that terminology, which path am I on right now? Although if you were a Bastunian, you'd probably end up saying, oh, look at that, I'm a builder.
Yeah.
I'm defined by this thing. There's another quiz if you want to go even deeper than that, where you can find out what type of beast you are. You might have caught Dillon talking about the explorers. There's the ones that dive into the ocean depths, and there's the ones that climb to the top of the mountain, and there's the winged beasts, and then there's the runners that cross the world on land. Well, there's further sort of like sects, or I forget what we call them, beast types.
Yep, beast types.
They even have these different sigils, like these different iconography that you can identify them by, like a badge that they'd wear. And so you could be an explorer, sprinter, or a mariner, or a climber, or a pilot, or there's 12 of them. So if you can take another quiz to begin to start thinking of, okay, if I were in Bastunia and I'm an explorer, and I have an explorer calling, an explorer beast, what does my beast look like?
Yeah.
That's just another one of these frameworks, so you can start to kind of imagine yourself in this world.
Yeah, I think when people have these frameworks, what I think is what I want to do is you put all 12 of them out there, and then give people an opportunity of like, hey, would you know what framework you fit in? Oh, I would love to be a builder, maker. I would love to be the builder that makes things and the visionary. I'd love to be a support role. I have a friend that's like, oh man, support role sounds so fun. Okay, so now the question is, if you were a support role, what would you want to support on? And you have, if you could throw this in the link as well, you've created an incredible map of Bastunia. You have it on you? I have it on me.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll have you show it. Absolutely amazing. So you can ask yourself, I mean, for people that are just listening, it's going to suck for you, but people that are get to seeing, it's like, man, would I live in Main City where everyone lives? Would I live in Metropolia in the far north where the builders live? Would I just want to be around other people that are walking my path right now? Would I want to be in base camp right at the foot of the Great Mountain and live with other explorers? Would I want to be in the Satvana Plains and I could live with anybody? Maybe I'm a nomad, but I feel like we've done a lot of the front end work where we can give people enough templates to say, where would I live in this? What would I be? What would my beast look like? And man, full circle, coming back to, teaching young kids creativity. I'd love to, you and I have stories for days when it comes to this, but what we don't know is what beasts would look like. And I would love to be able to work with schools, work with kids, and ideally work with parents too, so they have that connection to start ask people, what would you be? Or what would your beast be if you don't want to think of yourself? What would your beast do? What would it look like? And let's bring this to life for you, if you choose. And if you really want, we'll throw it in our comic. We'll put one of our characters, we'll attach one of our characters to this beast. And man, for young kids, dude, I get excited every time I talk about it. But for a young kid to say, holy crap, I thought of that in that comic. That's me. That's boundlessness. That because that beast looks that way, his human counterpart acts a certain way, which teaches a certain lesson, which could help a kid or a parent halfway across the country or halfway across the world. Dude, it's boundlessness through creativity. And I mean, it's just, it's something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that when you are speaking as a child, you do censor yourself.
Yeah, I know. Effing right, I do.
Yeah. So someday, this is the acknowledgements page from the first book from Tales of Bastunia. Right now, as I mentioned, there's 6 people on here: illustrator, illustration team. There's 2 of them. Formatting and layout. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Okay, I can count to 6.
You'll figure it out, baby.
Yeah, I did. I figured it out already. But yeah, it'd be so cool someday to see, Mrs. Emmorey's 6th grade class, and the beast that they created, or, just something like that. So that'll definitely happen here in the near future.
Yeah, speak it into existence, man. It's just the next step. I think our job is just to continue failing, continuously, doing reels right now, and to basically talk about each place in Bastunia. And I'm trying to reach our audience. And I'm like, if you kind of like this, you might live here. And I just did one for No Wasteland, which is where the Defenders live. And I'm saying, I'm doing this reel, and I'm like, yeah, if you like going to your local dive bars and hanging out with your friends, you could be a Defender. And I post it to everyone, and I'm like, this is for middle schoolers and elementary schoolers. What are you doing, man? So I will continue to make mistakes. We will continue to make mistakes. And I think that is just part of the creative process if you really love what you're doing.
Yeah, totally. Forgive us. But yeah, come along too. So we mentioned now there's three of us really that are like officially working on this. I guess maybe you could say the six of us that are on that acknowledgements page are all going to be involved in the second and third and beyond. But the more people we get involved, as this project has evolved from working with illustrators in the Philippines, into working with Evan, who is extremely talented, many decades of illustrating, has created tons of projects. We've just realized that in order to create the project into this boundless thing where there's 1,000 books in the next decade, each book that we create, we probably put $2,000 to $5,000 into it, depending on how things shake out. And we're not rich guys by any means. It's 1,000 books times 2,000. I demonstrated that I'm not great at math, but there's a lot of zeros there. And so a lot of the people that are listening to this who may be thinking of children's books or thinking about being involved in our world are going to face this at some point. I think I'm going to lose my audio.
Yeah, I hear you, but you could tell it changed.
All right, I'm back. Right.
Boom.
They're going to realize that there is more of an expenditure to it. And so in realizing that, Evan, actually, his suggestion was to do a Kickstarter. And so for anybody who's thinking about running a Kickstarter, let's talk a little bit about what that process looks like.
Yeah, man. Kickstarter I love it. It's fascinating because it's a great platform for creatives, right? It doesn't just there are a lot of books and comics that are on Kickstarter, but there's also just a lot of really cool gadgets. That's somebody that's creating, and it gives people an opportunity to back it if they want. And it gives people an opportunity to provide. I think one of the things we were fortunate enough to have a Kickstarter coach who is I went out and I invested in that as well, of learning how to run Kickstarter properly. And the thing that he says about Kickstarter is a chance for someone to contribute to something that they'll never be able to do themselves. But again, it's for me, boundlessness is like them being able to contribute their funds because they love it. They're putting a piece of them into this project, a piece of them to say, hey, I support what you're doing. Go out and do that. And I really like that. And it holds me accountable to say, okay, then I gotta really, one, create something amazing for you. And two, I got to promote it so people know and are willing to do this. And that's what got me on social media and stuff. But yeah, man, creating a Kickstarter and creating tier system in Kickstarter where if people back, they can back at certain tiers, and to have something that you can give them for backing at a certain tier. We had for our first Kickstarter, the very, $1 tier was they got to take this quiz to say, what path are you walking right now? Explorer, Builder, or Defender? And that was made by you. It was incredible. I don't know how you do it. It's awesome. And then the second tier was a digital copy of this first book, which we went into the black to create. But you get a digital copy sent to you, and you get I think it's just a digital copy sent to you. A digital copy, and then you also get the quiz. And then our third tier was you get a physical copy of the book, the one we've been consistently showing. And then the final tier, which is what I really love that we're doing, man, is for all of our books, the first 25 pages is comic. And that's created, kind of done by me with your oversight, right? The second 25 pages is prose. And that's where your brilliance comes in, where you take that entire chapter and write it like a chapter book. For the people that are a little bit more mature in their reading, can read. So I really see this getting to a point where the kids can read the chapter or the comic book, the parents can read the chapter, they can converse about it and tell each other what they're learning. And then for that third tier of our Kickstarter, or that last tier of our Kickstarter, you also created 3 short stories in the life, the life of a builder, the life of an explorer, the life of a defender. So we got to have 3 short stories of each path. Man, we created a lot to give to people. And I think if you're going to do a Kickstarter, that's how you should look at it, is like, what can I create now through my creativity to give people to back our venture? And for us, we set a goal of $500. We put about, I think the first book, we put $3,200, not talking manpower from our side, $3,200 into it. So we're like $500, we'll take the L, we'll take the loss, but we at least get our names out there. And we backed the end of the Kickstarter, we are at $5,500, $5,500. And we've probably made an additional $1,500 since then from book sales, people that weren't able to get on it. People will back your products. And if you put in the work to give them something in return.
Yeah. And it's our commitment and we're going to run a few more Kickstarters here coming up throughout the rest of the year, to every dollar for like the first, I don't know what we said, 80,000 that we raised is just going to go back into creating more books and creating opportunities for people to be creative with us. Whether that's, when they back, they can create their own beast and actually have our illustration team create your beast for you, or work with me to create a character that we're going to introduce into one of these short stories or into the comic itself. So it's intended to be boundless.
Huge. Oh man, you really had a good one there. And I just interrupted for a huge shameless plug for both of us. But I think when this Authority Figures episode comes out, which, side note, did you know Authority has the word author in it?
Yes.
When this comes out, we'll be launching our second Kickstarter for the month of June. So it's going to start end of May and go throughout June for 30 days. I recommend your first one is a 10-day sprint. For anyone that's listening to this, if you want to do Kickstarter, 10-day sprint, reach out to the people that you know. Make sure you're marketing on social platforms before you're calling people to what you do. Get out there on TikTok, get out there on Instagram. There are people there that I brought in at least 5 to 10 people that we do not know just because they saw us on social media. So get out there, talk about your world with a call to action of check out our Kickstarter. Make your first one 10 days. Our second one's 30. It's going throughout the month of June, and you have a chance to create your own beast with us. Take some quizzes if you need some help. Work with us collaboratively. Draw out in a very shitty way what your beast looks like. And I promise you, we will turn it into something amazing. Yeah, thank you, Matt. I'll tell you, man, we worked with a kid named Cade, who is our biggest fan, and he created a beast that is much cooler looking than mine. And it looks, let's see if I can find it real quick, or if I'm just going to waste time. What are you going to do, Dillon? Yeah, here we go. He created a builder beast. Man, can you see that?
Yeah, I see it well.
That attacks people with a giant pine tree and can summon an army of zombies. And he drew this, and I told him we don't have zombies in our world, but tell me more about him. And he told me a bunch, and Evan has slowly started to turn this into a beast that attacks people with a giant pine tree and then creates
golems, right?
Army of golems. Yeah, so this is still a rough draft, but man, that is a piece of cake that gets to exist in our books as we make this. So you have that opportunity on our second Kickstarter if you choose to back.
Yeah, find all of the links to the quizzes, to the Kickstarter, and anything else that's relevant to get you plugged in. You could go to our link tree, which I'll drop it in the description of this episode, or it's just linktree/Unfound Anamnesis. Unfound is pretty easy to sound out, just where it looks. Anamnesis is ANAMNESIS. Anamnesis, which maybe as we wrap, we could talk about this mouthful of a name and why we decided to go with Unfound Anamnesis as our comic book.
Do you want to each of us talk about the word that we added to it?
Yeah.
Because if there's a mouthful, if there's a person that gets blamed for the mouthful, it's not to point fingers, it's not me.
Yeah, I'll take it.
I came up with the word unfound. It actually stemmed from one of my favorite fiction series of all time, just changed my life, Dark Tower series by Stephen King. And I put my own spin on it. But the word unfound is in the great cosmos of this universe, or in the great picture of this cosmos, I should say, we have this battle between good and evil, right? And we have this battle between those that are found and those that are lost. And I think where we can really get that traction of making any change is going to be right in the middle, where we're not found, we're not lost, but we're unfound. Or again, I think it's anyone when they think of your calling in life, or what am I made to do? It's not, you're not lost. You might not be found. It's just unfound right now. I think it has that drive of pursuit, or that passion of pursuit that can come with the word. Yeah. And then anamnesis, Matthew.
Anamnesis, yeah. There's a word, the word remember has been a common theme in my life. Seems like, innocuous enough word, just sort of simple, remember, but in a spiritual context, I felt like as I progress as a like into more of a spiritual being, I realized that there's so many things that I am unlearning. It's like in the Bible, it talks about being in the world, but not of the world. Like the process of being in the world is unlearning what the world is actively trying to teach me all the time, and remembering what these most natural beliefs are, these most natural truths are, if the world wasn't trying to kind of steer me toward more shallow, my more base nature. And so with this idea of remembering, like becoming a member of the oneness once again, and so that was playing really heavily into my thoughts as we were coming up with a name. Anamnesis literally means the recollection of memories from past existences. It's kind of like amnesia, where amnesia would be like you're forgetting that things that happened in this existence. Anamnesis is like you've forgotten things that happened in past existences, and now you're remembering them. And so it's just this same idea, coming back to when you go through life, you have all of the wisdom and all of the knowledge, and it's accessible to you within your body. A lot of times it's just like getting the things that are blocking the great wisdom out of the way, so that it can become intuitive. It can become like through this process of gnosis, the self-knowledge. You just need to remember. So that's where anamnesis comes from.
And the thing I love about combining them, because it's really the biggest piece of feedback that we got that we didn't listen to was the name. Someone's like, I think it was Evans, like, hey, I love everything about this right now. And some other changes that we did make, but he's like, dude, Unfound Anamnesis is a mouthful. I don't know how you're going to do it. And I think it's something that, again, I love this faint recalling of a past memory, or a past from a previous existence. It's not lost, it's just unfound. And I think through creativity, we can kind of get faint touches of that. So it's like being able to be a part of the Unfound Anamnesis. That's your pursuit, is to find those and to bring them to life through creativity. And at a really simple level, you might just want to back what we're doing because you love the concept. If you want to go, head first into what we're creating, this is an invitation to anybody. I want to boundlessness. I want to create with a bunch of people. I would love to hear from people that want to create beasts and want to create characters and want to build this and create this together, because they dig what we're doing and they want to be a part of it. So choose what you want, choose none of it. Maybe you hated this whole podcast, but I just appreciate you listening to this. This far in. Did we beat the record yet of longest interview?
Oh yeah, we did. We got it.
Suck it, second place.
Well, good stuff. Yeah. So again, check in the episode description. We also have a Facebook group, Unfound Anamnesis again. But if you check that link tree in the show notes, you'll find access to the Instagram, to the TikTok, to the Facebook. Find whatever platform you like to connect with people on. There's the Kickstarter that's running likely right now, or there's probably another one if you don't catch the one in June. So a lot of ways to connect, and that is what this is for, is to be a collaboration.
Never stop creating.
Amen. Oh, that reminds me, I've been a synchronicity recently in my life, and then we'll wrap.
Wow, that was a perfect just 1-2 punch of ending, and then okay, keep going.
Yeah, we can end there, I can say this. Is I've been signing the Detourist, never stop exploring. And then I'm shopping the other day for shirts, for clothes, and I see this shirt. It says "Never Stop Exploring" on it, and I'm like, of course I need that shirt. So I got it. I should have worn it right now, but anyhow, maybe we'll cut this. Trash.
No, actually, don't cut it. Keep this, man. Never stop exploring. Never stop creating.
All right. Thanks, Dillon. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, brother.